Just a general.
Yeah.
I feel like it's the appropriate confident stance.
Yeah. I think people who are too confident about the future. Yeah. I like the clustering towards the front, folks. You've done us proud. Thank you so much. Okay. Who's doing bunny ears? They can see us. Nicole, can you hear us? No, she can't. That's because they're doing the appropriate thing and not having the audio go live into the room yet because the event hasn't started. Oh, now there's a thumbs up and some waving.
Yes,
Hello.
we can
You
hear it.
can hear us? That's a really nice coffee table you have there.
Yeah.
This is really well, sort of mid-century modern, glass top. You know, it's controversial. Some people feel badly about the glass top table. I personally, I accept it as a part of the varied vocabulary we have for internal decoration. Also, we're seeing an excellent rug. We have a rug here for the people in Singapore. You can't see our rug, but it is very nice. It's got like a sort of pink and green line through it. It looks maybe a little more utilitarian than the rug you guys have, but it's still a fine rug, and we wouldn't speak against it. Okay. Will we start the event? How does Singlet Station feel about that?
Yeah, I think we can. Yeah, we can start.
I feel a little bit like a poet at an open mic now, where you sort of do a lot of like explaining of the thing before the thing itself happens. So this is going to be like the sort of open mic explanation of this event. So thank you everyone for coming to Singlet Station in Singapore and here to the Manchester Poetry Library in Manchester. This is the final event of a program that's been running since last year called UNDERTOW. As a brief context and explanation, I'll explain what that is. UNDERTOW is the UK's first creative development scheme specifically focused on multilingual creativity. So English is an additional language for over 20% of primary school children in the UK. Millions of young people live polylingual lives, switching back and forth between languages and cultures, and UNDERTOW was created to embrace the massive creative potential of this group and ignite a passion for poetry that runs wild between languages and fosters multilingual creativity. And I remember writing that 3 years ago. So this is the third iteration of UNDERTOW, and we have an amazing cohort of poets who are all here with us. And then we did a partnership with Singlet Station in Singapore, who are a platform in Singapore that unites readers and writers. And everyone I've talked to has very nice things to say about them. We have a lot of poets, both here in the room and in Singapore, to get through. So I'm going to keep this quite minimal in terms of introduction, so we can get to the meat of the poetry, or the vegan alternative to the meat, depending on how you swing. Like a seitan, maybe, or or a tofu even. You can work out which of you is tofu and which of you is meat independently later on. The UK poets this year worked with Kit Fan, who's here in the audience, and they also did workshops and had one-to-one mentoring sessions, and they also did reading group sessions with the translator, writer, and poet Conan Marasligil. We'd really like to thank the Manchester Poetry Library, who were a big partner this year and provided us with space, encouragement, and just like a sort of "we're here with you, buddy" vibe, which was very, very helpful. Also, Singlet Station for being an amazing partner. Absolutely fantastic in every way, apart from the massive time difference, which meant that we're all here at 11 o'clock in the morning. But we can't blame anybody for that. That's literally just the size of the planet. That's nobody's fault. And finally, the writing squad, who helped finance everything. So they were incredibly generous partners. I'll be introducing the poets one by one as they come up. Unfortunately, one of the Singaporean poets, Zaha, was not able to take part today for personal reasons. But if you could put your hands together and then apart and then together again in rapid succession for Noah Jacob, who's our first poet. I've mistaken this. I've called Noah up slightly too early before reading her bio. So now you have to stand here as I read your bio, which is really embarrassing for you. So Noah Jacob is an interdisciplinary poet, performer, and critic based in London of mixed Arab heritage. Her writing often explores boundaries between human and unhuman, interrogating the poetry within biology, automation, and nature. Take it away there.
Thank you for showing me how short I am. All right, so my name is Noah, as you know, but in Arabic it's Nuhleila. Thank you so much for having me here today. And to open this, yesterday I closed the night and today I'm opening, so great. Okay, so this first poem is called On Nights I Am. I've gone through many iterations of this poem with Kit this year and it's been kind of crazy, but this is actually the first iteration because I wanted to do a little full circle movement before building it back up. On nights I am. On nights I am girl again. I am unemployable as woman, don't do the work, beg at corner of ends on leg too short for crip walk into sensible trousers. Tailor cigar to this half-man mouth, bring it to my half-moon mouth, lycanthrope into woman beast, giant in swagger, neck-deep neuroses around stiff collar, fail the interview, I'm hideous, mama. On nights I am, girl again. Phone autocorrects, butch to bitch, at spine, body autocorrects, back to bottom cupboard. It's been years since you made a man out of me. It's been years since I touched the stuff. Testosterone prescription, underlate back to girl, point and laugh at mirror, mirror, a second set of fingers pointing and laughing at me. I march, tight-lipped, background, the back door to the background, from one gender to the bottom rung of the ladder. On nights I am, girl again. Despite my protests, here I am. Dyke in this lifetime, small fire on pavements, I learn the language well, I cycle high, I give awkward backpack goodbye. I get gruff fade over bathtub, press gently now. The skin is softer, though I won't admit it. Burn incense dry in place of empire. Thank you. So I'm just finding my second poem. So this poem was written for my grandma, who was Circassian. And in 1864, the Russian Empire killed and expelled the indigenous Circassian people from just north of Georgia. The survivors fled to Turkey, the Levant, and across Europe, severing their connections with their culture, language, people. The flesh has curdled so deep it forms a second kind of milk. For hours, Baba staccatos, keep your eyes before they are taken, keep your eyes, but excise the sun to Circassia. The heart beats off tempo, so he palpates. I know you, mountain dweller, remember like me, like Mama, Sinai runner, Baba holds me closer to the light. Watches the nucleotides in my cheeks shift into the night's genocide. Don't open when it's this bright. Be like the dogs and run in the dark. A baby cry beckons an army, so instead surrender. Surrender to red lick up cheeks of trees sink. Sink. Sing alpha, beta, northeast of here is Arabic better than Mama taught me who spoke in centuries. Silence. From the forest the sun drops.
Thank you very much. Our second poet, Nurhafiza Binti Hamza, is not actually with us, nor are they in Singapore. So their work is going to be read today by, I think, Matan in Singapore. But Nurhafiza's work explores themes of identity, language, and the human experience, ranging from reflections on everyday life to deeper explorations of culture and emotions, often drawing from her own experiences in Singapore's multicultural society. She's been featured in Lahil Ash-Shahar, Volume 1, the opening act, and she's recently begun sharing her work more publicly. Take it away.
Hi everyone, Martin, one of the staff here at Stinglit Station. So unfortunately, Nurhafiza isn't able to be with us. She's ill, so I'll be reading her poem in the original Malay language and also the English translation on her behalf. So this poem is called Ratapan Seorang Perindu. Terapung-apung di awangan, tersentak jatuh rebah ke bumi, kendali hidup, kendala jalan, kendala jangan, aliran air tak mampu dihenti. Habis ditangkis makin melimpah, butir-butirnya jadi derayan, arus dibendung bercurah-curah, bergenang ditadah, ditekuk, ditahan. Hasil jahitan kaitnya patah, niat ditenun jadinya kain, gentian dipintal, benangnya basah, rajutan terlerai setelah terjalin. Lautan dalam mampu diselami, tingginya gunung sanggup didaki, bahkan langit rela ditakluki, meskipun yang dicari tiada lagi. Kalimah dihunus menusuk sepi, merembes hiba terlerai di hati. Sudah tertulis takdir sebegini, yang pergi takkan mungkin kan kembali. So this is the English translation. Lament of the longing. Drifting, weightless in the sky, jolted, crashing to the ground. Steady steps, yet fate defies, like a river's course, never turning round. The more you resist, the stronger it flows, each drop a storm, a tide untamed. Held back, it spills, it overflows, gathered close, yet never claimed. Threads unravel, stitches fray, a woven hope undone in time. Fibers twist, their strands give way, drenched before the cloth can bind. Oceans deep may still be crossed, mountains climbed and skies subdued, yet what is sought is ever lost, for what is gone will not return. Blades of words cut through the quiet, echoes sinking, seeping through. Fate has carved its final verdict. What is lost will not renew. Thank you.
Very much. Our next poet today is Ethan Chua. They are a Chinese Filipino poet, community organizer, and translator. Their first chapbook, Sky Ladders, won the Front Page Bull City Press 2022 chapbook contest. I believe Ethan is a one-person Amazon where you can just walk up to him and buy the book. And, you know, you should do that because poetry is worth more than money. So, obviously. Their first graphic novel, Doorkeeper, is available in Philippine bookstores, but not directly from Ethan, I don't think, sadly. Oh, okay. So also buy his comic book. I didn't realize this was possible, or I would have done that already. Ethan, save me from this.
Unlike one-person Amazon, I will not bust your union, so join your local union today. Yeah, and hi everyone, I'm Ethan. It's lovely to be here again. Thank you to the Manchester Poetry Library, thank you to Byrne and to Undertow and to Kit and to all the lovely poets here. This first poem is just a poem that comes from having spent time in the LSE encampment for Palestine. At our encampment for Gaza, a stranger teaches me to pray. I kneel as he kneels. Afternoon prayer. He rests, his palm atop his knee, extends one finger for the one God he explains later. But now I repeat the gesture, not sure of its meaning. He presses his forehead to the floor. I follow, half a second late. He is moving stone, gnomon of a vast sundial, I on the Janamas, his throne shadow. In the silence between rakat, I remember the story of Elijah and the widow, whose jug of oil he blessed to pour and pour until rain returned to the land. I imagine another widow, her store of flour and oil running dry. She walks past the bombed-out hospital to pray next to her neighbor. Assalamu alaikum, says the brother on my left, the brother on my right. Not of Al-Shati or Jabaliya, knowing less than even your most absent devotee, what right have I to be the one who doubts? And the second poem is called Every Game of Mahjong. Let me just flip my phone. Every game of Mahjong is also a question about seasons. Winter seizes the orchid in play, is succeeded counterclockwise by fall. Anyone passing by can sit at your table and become the manager of birds. The tiles, baby teeth, might float to the surface of the broth if you overwater your congee. In Hong Kong, students play it in a dark room where the negatives of still submerged photographs appear in tears of mercury on the blocks. Now and then the spoke of an umbrella or the beauty mark of a colleague render spider-like under the cardinal directions. Each clack of the pieces into the brimming pool at the center of your grand aunt's dining table is an admonition, sit up straight or die crooked, and an unanswered plea for love. The rules are not Google searchable. The best instructors are Jin. On occasion, dice are rolled. Each pip that shows face up is a cousin in the underworld whose voicemails you've deleted from your inbox by accident. In Vancouver, aliens play in the shadow of high-rises who've pawned off their organs for paper strips. These hang from their necks like rosaries or upturned ideographs. Display a hand of 5 and rearrange, as you like, the stars. The pot is fortunes. 6 of whorls. Fate's lost her house keys again. 2 blossoms drawn in sequence. A judge of hell unpins his catheter, slips through a windshield's crack. In New South Wales, drifters play with pieces of gold that wash up silt-covered from the nearest river. Sometimes the players hold the gold pieces to their ears and hear in the mineral dim eruptions of dynamite. For high-stakes games, wager a lover's approval, the secret humor of a friend. Leave with bruised palms. When you've played enough, no matter the table, you'll always be dealt the numbers to the unit of your childhood apartment. Ring the doorbell, take the spiral stairs. With a winning hand, the one who answers might wear your ama's face.
Next up, we have Conan Tan, who is a Singaporean Chinese poet and undergraduate at the University of Oxford. He's a recipient of the 2024 Martin Starkey Prize, highly commended in the 2024 Oxford Prize, and the winner of the Singapore's 2022 National Poetry Competition. In all these cases, their bios actually run on much longer, and I've just cut them short. So, and I feel really guilty, actually, because every time I finish reading, I think, oh, there's a whole other prize that I shouldn't have mentioned. And then other people, I'm like, oh. So you should go online and read their full bios. But even though Conan is one of our Singaporean poets, he's here with us in person, thanks to the wonders of international travel. Please come to the stage, Conan.
Thank you, Bern, for that. So I'll be reading 2 poems today. The first poem is titled Inheritance because I think every queer poet has a poem called Inheritance, or something to do with inheritance, in like somewhere in their writing. So I'll be in this poem I'll be using a Chinese proverb, 打是疼，骂是爱, which is commonly used by parents in Southeast Asia with the literal translation that beating is a sign of affection and scolding is a sign of love. Inheritance. Before my boyfriend, I strip into apology for all my tenses, the past, present, and future conditional of my bones. My voice fractional with relapse, because I was pulled from my mother's rib. That first wave of joy, that fresh milky flood. Trust that I kicked like the strong, healthy fetus I was. Even my great-grandmother would be proud. Years later, caught with a boy's tongue in my throat, I learned that my strength was hereditary. 打是疼，骂是爱. So I wore every heirloom bruise like a butterfly tattoo. So I learned to love boys who love beating other boys. The grammar of pain begins with pronoun. I am, I was. I felt safest in the womb, wrapped in cord beside myself, before the scalpel edged me into first person, where my face, once a circle, once a line bent out of corner, crackled alive like freshly roasted vinyl. And I was born reaching for my mother's lungs, lapping the weather and wreckage from her breast. Years later, caught with a boy's heart in my hand, I sliced the sin clean. He reached out towards me with a hug I mistook for friction. I flinched. I bent the flame. The guilt pulled in my voice, in my throat like bloodline. I kept apologizing. I kept loving boys. I keep. So that poem was published in Barely Self Review. So if you want to check it out with the kind of intricate form, you can check it out online. The next poem I'll be reading is the one that was highly commended in the Oxford Poetry Prize. So please do consider supporting the editors because there's so many amazing poems in this collection. When I got my contributor's copy, I literally stopped all the essays I was doing and I was flipping through it for an hour. So it's called Heart Attack. The morning after it happens, your mother reschedules your death. Generous woman that she is, offering you second bones and new soil. The temperature yawning back into ligament, lung, the lower case of stolen youth. The sun rises from its scissored sky. Birds open from the cage of your newly minted chest. There's a spotted brown deer leading you from the pavement to the meadow. But that's the best part, and the best parts always come later. For now, you're stuck with a new time of death, new ways of living outside yourself. I'm trying to find a kinder name for your mother, to forgive her for mapping you into this limbo, this dream and dance. The road, now a chair, now half-eaten sushi on your desk. You reach for the blinds and light spills from your heart's leaky valve. No one sees it coming. Not the Angsanas across the street with their arteries outstretched into a hug. Not the sun dipping below the flat line of your chest. In this autumn wreck, the wind coaxes the neighboring coals into silence. All around me, lost, no longer lost, you, no longer you. The stories people invent when they're grieving or ashamed or both. A week ago, you leaned over with the truth of touch and the affection of us and whispered small, beautiful lies about 2 fawns leaping headfirst into spring. Their faces majestic, scared, alive against the strangled woods. At your funeral, I looked for those fawns. Your mother guides herds of relatives to light joss sticks at the altar, bow before the picture of you cloud-soaked, cheeks turned towards the sky like a boy witnessing birds migrating for the first time. The first time I went bird watching, I didn't spot any. Only a sleeping sambar I nearly mistook for roadkill. With her eyes closed, I couldn't tell if it was the concrete that diagnosed her body or if she lived the same chronic September lie. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Conan. Our next poet is Tayyiba Suleiman. They are a writer and a translator from Manchester. They graduated with a degree in English and modern languages in 2023 and completed an emerging translators mentorship with Jamie Lee Searle in 2024. She currently works for New Books in German. Sadly, although they're a Manchester poet, they cannot be here with us today, so inversion of Conan. Instead, Tayyiba will be joining us live on tape from their apartment in London.
Hi, my name is Tayyiba Suleiman and I'm a writer and translator from Manchester. And this year, as part of UNDERTOW, but also as other projects, I've written a surprising amount about libraries. So that's some of the things that I'm going to read today. The first thing is the text that I wrote for the UNDERTOW exhibition. And I've made kind of little illustrated story cards, essentially. And I'll read the words that I wrote for them. The literature in this library is always moving. I never seem to find a book in the same place I left it. Sometimes poets shelve the poems. Sometimes the shelves roll out the door. Someone has whirled the word lit around. Someone has translated the translations. One evening, a book slipped from its perch and hurled itself at my feet. I put out a hand to help it up, but it preferred to clasp the earth. That's the text I wrote for the exhibition. And if you're in Manchester, then hopefully you can see the little drawings I did along with it. And then the second thing that I wanted to read from is a project that I did earlier this year called MAP, which is actually all based in Central Library, Manchester Central Library, which is just a stone's throw away from the Poetry Library. And I wrote a series of like short snippets, kind of imagined from the perspectives of different library users. So I'm not sure, you know, of course, in this audience, there'll be hundreds of local and very beloved libraries. And maybe you'll recognize some of these people in the people you see there. So these are the snippets from floor 3, 2, and from the cellar. Well, I say the cellar, but the underground part of the library. So, I've been to the chief librarian's office many times, but I've never once seen the chief librarian. They always fill the room with meetings or workshops instead. It was a Saturday the last time I was there. The longer the day went on, the louder the noise outside became. I stood up to look out the window. I don't remember it being the anniversary of anything in particular. But there were 2 protests happening in parallel, circling the library like bodies in orbit. As soon as I opened the window, in swarmed the drums from the marching band. I considered shouting down to ask what was happening, and would they mind keeping it down? But they'd never have heard me over the beat. I could see some figures dancing, their faces half wrapped in scarves. Maybe one of them was the chief librarian. Floor 2. I've loved this place ever since I was a child. I didn't know my way around the city then. I had no use for most of the floors. They all seemed to be full of serious people doing serious things. But I could always come up here to pretend I knew where I was going, because if I just kept walking in one direction, then I'd end up exactly where I started. And then this last piece is the one based on A visit to the archives, which are kind of in the like underground part of Central Library, and they're these strange, essentially like freezing, like tiny rooms to keep all the old film in a good condition. And this is the little snippet that I wrote for that. Before you can have the past back, you'll have to let it defrost. The vault is like a cryogenic chamber. Colour film has to be kept cold, and black and white film has to be stored colder. Coldest of all is the room for the most delicate films. Before a film can be restored, though, it has to reach room temperature in a little space called the lobby. It's more of a cupboard, really, but I've always liked the name. I imagine the final scene of an old holiday film, a family so exhausted that they've barely managed to check out of their hotel rooms. I'm letting them doze on the lobby sofas before gently shaking them awake. I can't imagine they'll be best pleased when they rub the sleep from their eyes and suddenly find themselves in the ribcage of a library instead of a grand reception hall. It's thankless work. Nobody likes to be woken up without knowing where they are or how they got there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, as Sabia alluded to, if you go into the stacks of the library over there, not only are there lots of poetry, which is good in itself, and reason enough to go to the stacks, nested amongst the shelves, there are wee vitrines showing exhibitions put together by our poets. So each of the Undertow poets was paired up with a corresponding Singaporean poet, and they worked together to make these wee exhibits, all on the theme of the future is. So at the end of the event, I encourage you to wander in and see what you could discover. Next up is Frank Kui. They are a British-Chinese poet raised in Kent. He is the winner of the Foyle's Young Poet Competition in 2023 and was mentored by poets Jean Ya and Jonathan Edwards. He's particularly interested in the exploration of his dual cultural background. Yesterday, I think, was your first time doing an open mic night right here, and you kicked it out of the house. So, yeah, we're looking forward to your reading. Thank you very much.
Hi guys, so I'll be doing 2 poems today. So the first one is it's called Hometown Eulogy. It's what was put forward for my foils competition, and it's a little bit about it's about visiting my hometown after COVID, after I hadn't been back for a really long time. So, Hometown Eulogy. I asked my father where home is, and he tells me it is Jinan, the city of springs. Here, April sheen frames the water lily bulbs like a gold filament painting. The sky stays persimmon colored after midnight. South of the river, I grew up wrapped in a red flag. The fabric stiffens my tongue and teaches me to speak in idioms. When he asks me to turn, I tell him that I remember home falling like rain on a bruised London afternoon. In the back of a Wetherspoons, my sister tells me home is shaped like a plastic bag. She tells me home is minding the gaps. Home is the Bakerloo line northbound with 2 stops to go. Home is how my lips yield when I grieve that I will never belong. I ask my mother where home is, and she tells me it is the ache sewn into the strokes of my name. And if I pick out the stitching with my fingernails and find again where I began, home is somewhere between the seats of this empty plane. Thank you. So my next poem is actually formatted a little bit differently. So it's a specular poem, and how that works is that the poem is read like line by line, but then it's reversed in the second half. And me personally, I love kind of experimenting with new styles, and as Kit has taught me, writing is actually supposed to be enjoyable, and it's not supposed to be like serious all the time. But I do enjoy like experimenting with new styles, even though it might go wrong at times. But yeah, so this is a poem that I wrote quite recently as a specular poem. Ragdoll. I'll ask you to do it again. To make a doll out of me, so when you put this body in motion to lay your scars on like a fault line, to tell me that I am no longer the man who staunches my hurt with your breath, you'll find that I'm just another porcelain thing to remind you that the splitting of my seams I lie awake to are nothing to the lips you sear on my skin, shaped like the Pleiades on my cheekbones. These wounds that open like sepals in spring, these limbs that you must fashion as your own. Oh, glass blower, oh, sculptor, redeem me, reconstruct me, so when you wrap me around your arms, I will never shatter this relentlessly again, no matter how much I long for it. No matter how much I long for it, I will never shatter this relentlessly again. So when you wrap me around your arms, redeem me, reconstruct me, oh glass blower, oh sculptor, these limbs that you must fashion as your own like sepals in spring, these wounds that open on my cheekbones, shaped like the Pleiades, are nothing to the lips you sear on my skin. I lie awake to the splitting of my seams to remind you that you'll find that I'm just another porcelain thing who staunches my hurt with your breath, to tell me that I'm no longer the man to lay your scars on like a fault line. So when you put this body in motion to make a doll out of me, I'll ask you to do it again. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Frank. Next up, we have Rochelle Lee. They are an aspiring writer from Singapore who writes comfort poems that she needs to read but can never seem to find out there. She has been previously published in Amber, the teenage chapbook, and All In, the snack fiction anthology, and the Zooey Bar anthology. Again, thanks to the wonders of international travel, the Wright brothers, and our increasingly shrinking modern world, they are here in person.
Again, exposing my height. Thank you very much. Yes, hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Rochelle, and I'm from Singapore, but I'm currently studying in KCL for English, and I'm so excited to be here at the Manchester Poetry Library today. So the first poem I'll be reading, it's basically, it came from the idea of imagining my accent as a personified entity. And because I'll be reading this aloud, I feel like this is a poem which you can have your interpretations from the way I sound, because I think everyone I've met has had such polarizing opinions on where I'm from, just based on how I sound. So yeah, it's called voice-to-voice recognition. Nothing is neutral except for the sound of your last name. Lee, wolf in sheepskin, 3-act structure, unassuming, the worst. Shake your own hand in mimetic mocking, tangled, my wildness, your windpipe, parched, without silence, a dare, a yawn, for starvation, the incubator, leaking your consciousness in seamless, embryonic ways. Who of the two of us spoke first, do you think? You open your mouth, realize no word aloud. The answer, its glare. Your palate, my pillow, plasticine relaxing in the firm shape of others. Americana, that billowing chest, demanding attention, demanding trouble. Muscles stay tensed. Asian, that implacable locus, 2 alliterations, overriding their origins, their focus. Nothing can be achieved by halves, except you. There are signs, if you should look. Rises in end pitch, downturn size, in filler pauses, caught, startled, caught vulnerable, family deference, seeping in. What is Chinese to an English cadence? Is this how a human meets empathy? Like sweet relief, pedaled, bladed tones, china shards. But how much are you letting go? And how much is left? Call home, pick up more than old habits. Subject, verb, object. Piece those connectors like tissue syntax. English informal enough to be understood. Dialect, memorized. If you're unlucky, your mother will attempt a Teochew lesson. If you're lucky, you will fill in the gaps. You speak like you could be a movie character, your cousin said. What to make of such an aspiration? Someone traveled, or worldly, so cosmopolitan, so positively international. Even your breastbones seem to flex. But over here, your words are too clipped, crisped, overeager birds, slip of the teeth, neutral bordering on British, always something else to learn, to contradict. We are tongueless in defense. A fluke everywhere is a person nowhere. Is this me, or is this my voice? Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. So the next poem I'm reading is actually the one I submitted for this program to begin with. And the title, 词穷, it's one of my favorite Chinese words because the literal translation is like a poverty of words. And it kind of used this as a reminder to think about the times where I felt exiled from my own mother tongue. And the opening line is from Magnolia by Nina Mingya Paulus. It's one of my favorite poetry collections. I am a two-flight thing. I am half sun, half moon, and the scissors used to cut away the steamed lotus leaves. I am honey strokes spreading over the tiles. You're a 4th of July summer baby, and sweet lily seeds flower for you by the roadside. Those red bean cheeks, like puffed up, pliable sacks, stood them all in. A chubby treasure, a half-filled bun, a protective streak searing enough to consume. Depending on who you ask, a princess. Depending what you know, a plum-like shell, burned. How much of the dirt do you know, and in what thickness? Is it the same grit that makes your voice catch, as if the language is a breath away from a teardrop? It makes no sense how each direction is the pull of a new wind, and a palm can be a 5-fingered heart, and lotus root is also called raingrass. Everything can always be prettier. There is another word for happiness that's lived and loved, the kind that persists on the warmth of your skin. Everything shakes like a branch's frail spine. Speak now, or you'll lose me, but there is no time in the world to make up for the distance of words. There is no time to meet someone halfway when they're already almost there. They don't ask for much, but you think they think it's because you can offer them nothing more than a picked apart bone, the faintest thread of a dialect in the night. It's embarrassing, but it'll only be more embarrassing to look embarrassed. So we fill in spaces with laughter and compliments that are easy on the ears and the tongue. You're so cloying, it's charming, but the knife will dull eventually, and you learn that being blunt doesn't work like being sharp. Your grandmother reminds you that 没有 is not used the same way as 不是, as if there is such a way to predict that you will not have what you will not have in the future, that the lack is not the same as not having. Time does not pass here, but you will. There is no keeper of your memory. Everyone is told to remain silent at the dinner table, and the words churn inside you like a spit bucket of discard, a spoiled thing on a butterfly's wing, a mirror full of ugliness. To your knowledge, there is no word opposite from being fluent. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up, we have Soledad Sultana. They are a Venezuelan, London-based poet, feminist community organizer, and human rights researcher. She's studying international human rights law at Oxford University and is an alumnus of the Barbican Young Poets program. And they are right here.
Hello. I've never performed like so soon after waking up, but this is gonna be interesting. So I'll be reading my first poem from this Pringle can. And yeah, it's a poem that I also submitted in my application, and Kit was really amazing in helping me kind of edit and put together. It's something that I wrote while I was doing some research in Colombia about migration. So it was a lot of me, I think, thinking about positionality in terms of researching human rights violations and just injustice and oppression that happen in the migratory route from Colombia through Central America into the US. And this is called Uneven Holes. Barbed wire dangles from loose skin. They break in, sloshing fluids. I kneel beneath them, swab and container and hand. The doll's head has 4 plastic follicles. Hair sprouts from 2. Cheap limbs and oversized, uneven holes. I take pictures of their scalps with the flash on. Time gathers more skin than dust. Lifting my luggage into the overhead compartment, Ma asks about the Barbie. Es que no es Barbie, Ma. My first boyfriend, a Danish boy, he touched himself while calling me a sewer rat. A woman rubs her rosary. A pregnant woman bangs on the toilet door with both fists. I watch movies the rest of the flight on the little screen on Ma's back. Her hand pauses on her neck, her eyes on the UNHCR logo on my chest. Thank you. This second poem was actually written in response to a prompt by Kit, the octopus poem with 8 lines and 8 words in each line. This is Cellophane. It's based on a kind of legends about why you should keep your belly button closed when you're pregnant, or else like the spirit of the fetus will fly away from you. So yeah, this is Cellophane, you know. Wincing, I wrap the navel in blue cellophane. En el patio, hierbas burbujean en un vientre de aguardiente. Strange crop the body's harvest is. I shove a little finger back inside me. Alcohol gestates, infusing centimeters beneath the earth's membrane. Apenas abra las piernas se lo tragarán completo. I doze off to plastics crinkling, the fauna of the underskin, breathing and dying in secret. Thank you.
The Pringle can going back to its safe place. Next up, in Singapore, thanks to the miracle of fiber optic cable, I guess, and electricity, perhaps, we have Tui Din Cao. Their biography, by the way, is fantastic. Listen to this. Tui Din Cao makes art. While daydreaming, being a flaneur, he explores and engages with cultural stories, historical and contemporary, and across various disciplines and art forms, especially literary and performing arts. He gathers and embraces stories, conversing across and playing with thresholds and liminalities. Off you go.
So, hello everyone. My name is Tuệ. I'm a Singapore-based Vietnamese student and writer. And today's poem is inspired by 2 magazines in the National Library of Singapore written by Vietnamese refugees who sojourned in Singapore in the 80s. This is by no means the first ever poem written about this subject. You can check out Operation Thunderstorm by Singaporean poet Theophilus Quek. In my writings, I try to be inspired by both Vietnamese and Singaporean sensibilities to create a sort of transnational flair. Yeah. So unfortunately, I cannot be at Singlet Station today because of my overcommitting ass. But anyway, the poem is titled Forward to Nhân Chứng Issue 3 at View Road, Sembawang. The air is oiled with dark juice wrung from tree trunks, marinating themselves to mush and exfoliating grains of time. Stir forbidden laksa, dip in to sink into forbidden elixir. Chafed souls sneaked, stumbling uphill in July noon's light. An eyelidless eye, a sun with lashes stretched thin like cobweb, hours straight. Look, smell. Beneath the milky katong sheen, sniff out sedimentary notes of marrow bones and spiced souls of hoi, din hương, gừng, thảo quả, quế, only to hear echoes of holding Hong Kong town, wow, where? Splintered mirages. Final days phantoms rehearsing their cliffhangers to perfection. Angels' wings dust floated off blackbirds' scribbles of English hymns, camouflaging atop the paperwork as surgeoners check one last time. A soccer ball, deflated of howls of children, sec 2 and lấp để ngủ, lurking deep down in a stuffed bag. Sour whiff of hair dye from a local salon smudged on sleeves of a jacket once haggled from Bentan Market. Fragments from a funeral trombone, a wedding choir, and a guitar's electric twang made some non-last their studios, composing unfinished singles, while the rest cocooned salted faces from the sun as they tangled for Changi, westward bound. But for what? Leaving for what? Leaving behind what but prints, rubber sandals, and wet hands, kissed their thanks, silent, hurried calligraphic notes on gravel paths and cabin walls, leaving the small sunny island with only sunniest qualities are sanctioned to stay, inscrutable charms at best, steadily and incessantly be winded down by wind and heat. Hospitality, top-notch, after all, must be maintained. Room must be made for an export factory with talented workers perform in sync to exotica industrial beats. A new office building of the techiest tastes, and black and white condo with mosaiced oasis after Babylon, shaped like rare mutated kidney. A deserving homemaker would settle down up on the hill any time soon. 20 years are but a short wait for Singapore. What is to bleed vines of money plant, leaves like marbled heart cutouts, but a pragmatic proposal, a mere mechanism of self-defense for his body, with flakes crusting over concrete stumps like abstract wasp flaring shades of warning. Guarding gates corrugated over his skin, dirty, with unworthy steps, fresh off unseaworthy boats. One must grow calluses on his heart, unless his blood juice sells. Here is a small, sunny island, with only sunniest qualities. Drying frayed sea slips sea-soaked of memories and will, laid out, cut apart, and collaged back as songs, with maybe cooked rice for glue, chalky psalms for sprinkles, and hardened by a side of soccer into cashy pearls, iridescent mushrooms rooting precariously on census and encyclopedia spines, accidental morsels boasting a homely touch of prata slabs. No longer are the camp and its supposed taste, but one may smell it, see it, always a witness, a nyanjin, to ourselves, our many selves in poems we pen. Issue 2 wasn't the first, and neither is this, since there cannot be any last word about. The last line is from a poem by Singaporean poet Robert Yeo. Thank you for listening.
I don't know exactly who I'm thanking, but thank you. So next up we have Zainab Imram. They are a poet and facilitator of British Pakistani heritage from Manchester. She writes on a multiple of racial issues, with particular focus on queer diaspora, the hidden stories of women in the colonial struggle, and the post-colonial journeys to the West. Take it away, please.
Quite like what Conan said of every queer poet having an inheritance poet. I'm such a basic diaspora poet in that I obviously have a mother country poem, which is titled aptly Mother Country. It's it's the last poem in my master's dissertation that I did about the partition of India in 1947, that split India into Pakistan and modern, what we call India now, but based on kind of the Oristaya and a lot more kind of ancient kind of mythology and stories. But yeah, this is Mother Country. Your mother's country looks like it could kill you, but it won't, will it? It's your mother's country, after all, where the clouds do not let the red kites pass, so the red kites glassily sing their form of worship, the way the marble of the Badshai does to the damp padding of feet, the way tradition is upheld in pots of gold water on covered heads, the way you will come to lose the movie marigolds of Kashmir and follow the pollen blowing east as you saw the men drag your women to the wells and heard the river wrap you in your sleep. But when living in it long enough, you forget what it sounds like. But somehow, You never forgot the language of the country that would now kill you, but your father taught that the nation in that nation's poetry there is no space for quiet. You repeat whatever they demand. You carry on what they started. Thank you. I feel like most of my life is defined by work, poem, commute, and I commute so much sometimes. And I commute having to go to my university in Fife, Scotland. And I didn't realize that pheasants were a thing because I grew up in Manchester. So then I saw pheasants for the first time in the wild, and I was like, that's crazy. But if anyone knows the rap duo Sweatshop Boys with Riz Ahmed, there's a song called Birding, but it's rapped by Heems, the rapper, and just made me think of a lot of ideas about land ownership, that also classic poems about Jerusalem as well. And this is a poem that Kit Fan also helped me with as well. So this is called Pleasant Land. The pheasant could be a symbol of nostalgia. When I began to commute like this, I thought of nothing but England's green belt, the carpet at my cousin's nursery, a mobile of laminated words, green poster framing democracy, individual liberty, the turf at five-a-side, this pleasant land. Once we strayed onto a farmer's land and he answered with a rifle pointed to the sky. For so long after, my voice watched a fighter jet from the hedgerows, waiting as prey does. For so long, the wild running pheasants of Fife was a puzzle. Heems raps, she don't like you, she says you was a peasant. She said, I'm classy, like a ring-necked pheasant. A white girl from Tottenham, 2 failed dates between us on the bus, talks about Jerusalem. When crossing the Tay, watching the sunlight step over purple water, the lines of foam and spit gathering like the outline of a net, splitting up Dundee like the mesh of the net that rings around a pheasant's neck. Thank you. And this last poem is in the 30th issue of Gutta, which is a magazine based in Scotland. And there's some brilliant poets like Zane Rishi and Meredith MacLeod and Holly McNish as well. And they are just people I look up to so much. So it's such an honor to be published in this poem, in this collection, this issue, of the journal. And this is a poem I submitted for Undertow, and it's called Split. In a seminar, we discuss Orientalism. I no longer want to put my tongue on the table. I have no wish to be split in two. No longer want to lick the sunburnt flesh of this text. Cleopatra, fluid, Antony, imperial pillar. I feel my splitting regardless, water parting when it meets stone. At the British Museum, I step back from a glass case and bump into a white man. Anger sweeps across his cheeks like purple wildfire. I'm what, 7? Something splits open on my cheeks like a cardamom pod. And I can't even remember what I had been stepping away from. Maybe an anklet found in a harem, or a horse's stomach carved into a flask. I felt something fill my stomach like a flask. Or maybe a farmer's cotton shirt, now crucified in London, now so far from Punjab. So pure and white, washed of his accusations. No scent of August's splitting days when a nation was being washed of birth on its train tracks. And what filled my stomach then, I know it would not whet your thirst now. I could answer you like a canyon, or Titania's quiet Indian boy, no more serpent in her room. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm now going to take a mad digression because when that poem, one of the Heems quote came in, I let out a little whoop because I remember before Heems had the Sweatshop Boys, he was in a band called Das Racist. And he had a song about going to the Pizza Hut. And it's like the silliest rap ever. And I've witnessed in stages them becoming much more thoughtful, you know, poet and then and rapper, and you know, this kind of fully present intellectual person. And to suddenly see one of the Undertow poets, a Heems quote, come up, I was just delighted. I felt like my time listening to silly raps about Pizza Hut had not been wasted. It was an important part of my development as a cultural producer. Yeah, so next up, our final poet from Singapore, we have Nicole Ang. They are a freshman at the National University of Singapore, majoring in political science and English literature. They've been featured as a Merit Award winner in Singapore's 2022 National Poetry Competition. Her writing and books of choice revolve around nostalgia, home, and human aspirations towards love and tenderness in an increasingly violent world. Doesn't that sound great? Here we go.
The poems I'm gonna share today is very different from my writer's bio. They are a bit more personal accounts because I think like a lot of my friends are here today, so I wanted to dedicate this like sharing to them. But yeah, I think I'll just start off. So my first poem is called 得不偿失/ lost and found. So just to explain what 得不偿失 means, it usually connotes something along the lines of I've made a really bad like decision that is not worth it, or something that maybe, let's say, imagine an investment, like you invest in something and like you've made a loss. But I think very literally in Chinese, 得 means gain, and 不偿失 is like something you can't make up for. So I've gained something that I can never sort of replace. So yes, that's some context there. My friends say you leave a trail of yourself behind wherever you go. Sweaters orphaned on chairs, lint balms crying for help wherever the wind blows. Water bottles hiding under tables, bombarding my text history, as loud and all caps keywords to my friends, while somehow the dates at the side inch ahead, quiet and ritualistic. Somewhere, unbeknownst to me, their contents are simmering angrily under the static, and I can hear the newborn mosquitoes nag in my ear. If Singapore had seasons, my lost things would pass like them, a never-ending scroll of lost things that have found their way into a bad habit. Attention stretching its prism legs out by the edge of the windows, yearning to move past the hot, sticky afternoon. Eyes darting through the tumbling pile of abandoned water bottles. Past selves reading in a gust of wild amnesia. Limbless books at home, leaning on each other, offering no hope in their dim wintry crevices, nudging each other and protesting. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Friends like you who do offer sweet-smelling hope at every send-off, placing bottle after bottle in my shaking, parting hand, as you shake your head saying, no, really, it's okay if you lose it. Years ago, on the trail that I left behind, this piece of you marked the end of it. It might have something to do with the foreign air, but amongst these tall and proud buildings, I withhold my evidence of me having been anywhere. I don't lose it. I don't lose ever. But sometimes, an office, a classroom, a friend's home will retrace my footsteps. So I wind up next to some emotions in some bottles, next to some books, next to some of you. In those moments, I imagine my hands big enough like yours. I imagine that there will be no shaking, no parting, only an easy rhythm of lightness, reaching and tumbling through the air. Thank you. That's poem one. Part of it can actually be seen as I think part of the exhibition that in the Manchester Poetry Library. So if it's supposed to tie in a little bit with the exhibition's themes of like relearning like the spirit of reading Give Me That We Lost. So for the UK side, this is something that maybe you can have a look at. For my second poem, it was written last year when I received my A-level results. And I'm reading it, I think I cringe a little bit, but it's something that's very dear to me because I think I was feeling quite a lot of uncertainty at that moment. So yes, this poem is called like the reply to email. Dear Singaporean student, do you write for a living? I do. Dreaming out cumulonimbus clouds on a hill only makes them float past like Subway sandwiches. Not that I ever like Subway, they always have to feed you in the ears. These are things of lucidity that do not occur to me at night as I stare blankly at my laptop, pushing a few buttons, waiting to cash in moments of brilliance. Realizing that pushing buttons were only taught from math tuition, but brilliance only exists outside my shophouse condo conglomerations. Further ahead down Chinatown, the Yongdao auntie next that art will not feed me. 你的英文很好，做律师很好。Translation is, oh, your English is good. Being a lawyer would be good. The yellow noodles leap and sputter from her net like dying dragons. It reminds me that it's A-levels, but it's also dragon season. It's time to jump into boiling water, singing kettles, scarlet tongues held out at relatives. I'm lost in her vapor without the buttons and the common sense, so I always pay a few cents more. I suck at memorizing Article 14 of the Singapore Constitution or whatever powers I need to cash out this brilliance. My eyes willingly die to these clouds, loving the nights of blankness, the lack of mountains, rivers, 4 seasons. I write about my love of 4-leaf strawberry shortcake, my love of heat from math laughter and careless mistakes, love for crazy JC friends that are so anti-establishment, they hate the idea of doing anything for a living. I like how I could be an everyday writer instead of a living sort of writer. I like how these clouds could have once been tears on your shirt. When it's time to visit the open houses, I think I'd dig up a burrow and live in these words, so I'd be able to love you, so I'd be able to love. My nation's darlings, listen to the pitter-patter of hunger. Turn your ears to the heavy clouds and tell me what it means to live. Thank you. Sorry for the unfamiliar terms for the case. I realize a lot of things are really localized, but if you're curious, you can have a Google.
Thank you so much. That was really wonderful. So we've now come to the end of the main course. So that was all your tofu and your meat and possibly sayatan. We haven't quite worked that out. So now we're going to go on to the Q&A section. We're going to have a controversial, atypical standing Q&A for a number of reasons. Partly because I think my outfit looks better when I'm standing up, but also because there's so many poets and not so many chairs. So if the poets could just take the stage and line up here in order of height. Or not. Forget that. That was, I'm sorry. Okay. Okay. No, please don't do it by height. I was joking. I like 30% of everything I say out loud, I regretted it immediately. 30%. Not bad. Okay, so we'd really welcome questions from the audience, but I've got a couple of warmer-up questions. And similarly, if there's people in Singapore who've got questions, we'd love to hear from you. So raise your hand as though you're in school, if that works for you. Okay, we'll get going. So first of all, the program is primarily interested in you. Just as a sort of housekeeping note, there's lots of you plural in asking questions to 8 people, and I got very confused about how to do that. Like y'all, yous. For me, it's yes. That's how I would say it in Irish. So ustedes. So this program is primarily interested in ustedes as poets, but we're also very concerned with multilingualism. So translation in a sort of broadest sense as a way to exchange meaning between languages comes up repeatedly. And I was wondering if any of you all had something you wanted to say about how you use use translation as one of your writing tools. Or maybe you don't want to talk about that. That's for yourself, Noah.
Hi. So before joining this program, I had a large Arabic lexicon, but it was mostly in the realm of religion. Like I grew up very Muslim, very religious, and a lot of my speaking was in the Quran. And as I started writing poetry, I was like, I want to write spiritual poetry, but I don't know how. So this has been incredible in helping me access the language of spirituality, because for me it's not English. I can't access my spirituality in a lot of ways without speaking in Arabic. And yeah, it's been amazing to do that. And yeah, it's a conduit for the spiritual.
Yeah, so I'm bilingual. Well, bilingual, but I also was trying to learn French on Duolingo, but then the owl died. So okay, but yeah, the Duolingo owl died. If no one yeah. But anyway, so for me, because Mandarin Chinese, each word, so for example, like the word "bu," when you say it out loud, it actually, if you just say it on its own, it sounds like many different Chinese words because the characters themselves, a lot of the characters, have kind of very similar sounding characters. So for example, like I, which is love, sounds very similar to another word like I, which is about pain. And that kind of exploration of how sounds are captured and similar is something that I explore. And I think the translation aspect of it is really, really interesting to kind of look into, and that's how I do it in my poetry as well.
Thank you very much, Frank.
Yeah, and I'd also like to just add on to Noah's point, because I agree a lot with what they said. So about how some things are only accessible in certain languages, whereas some things are not. So for example, my languages are English and Mandarin, and I tend to write a lot of poems that are more intimate, and I cannot do that at all in Mandarin, because I think it just feels the language wasn't taught to me to be able to write stuff things like that in that language, and to be honest, I don't really read anything like that in Mandarin literature. So I guess it's really about the language, your mother language that's taught to you kind of shapes how you view that language as well. So I'd say English is my most fluent language, obviously, because I grew up here. So I feel I have a bigger range with that, but I feel I'm very constricted with what I can write about and what I'm able to write about in Mandarin Chinese. So.
Thank you very much. Nicole, would you like to throw in on this one?
Sure. I think thanks everyone for your responses, because it gives me some idea of how I think about translation. I think personally for me, how translation acts as a tool in my own writing, I feel that when I hear the term oh, I'm a bilingual person, I immediately cringe a bit inside, because I'm is that true? I can't really prove that I'm bilingual. I feel once I start speaking in Mandarin, I end up stuttering, and people are wait, that doesn't sound very correct. But my background is that I took Chinese literature when I was in junior college, and I love reading in my mother tongue, and I just really love both languages. So it's not I'm bad at Chinese. It's just more I can't prove verbally that that I have these thoughts and have this knowledge. So I feel translation, because it involves both languages. So it kind of just helps me to visualize in a way my own relationship with both languages. And I think what's really interesting about translation is that you know how often like in I think in literary work, it always takes like maybe the meaning of one phrase or one proverb in let's say our mother tongue. I think some of us did that earlier. And in English, we don't exactly like directly translate it over, but we use different like ways in which that like term could be translated to create like the possibilities and the deeper meanings that come with our work. So in a sense, it's not exactly like reinventing a world, but it's kind of like taking two worlds and then like creating something new. So I think that's a bit different from entirely like conceiving something. I don't know if that makes sense, but yeah, I've always found that so interesting. Yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you so much. One of the things that really struck me about your work, especially when you were looking at on the screen, we could see the text laid out, that there seemed to be a real concern with form, not necessarily like the mastery of classical forms, but sort of how language occupies space on the page. And I was wondering if any of you had something, thoughts about how it is that you tackle different forms. Or why it is all your poems look different, essentially what I'm trying to get at. That for 10 points.
This is going to be related to your question. I will also probably go on a bit of a tangent because I was recently speaking to a poet that was really concerned with the way that we use, like the way that a poem appears on the page and therefore to some extent form as a way of depicting like silence and gaps. And I was very interested in that. I think in the first poem that I read on the Pringles can, the poem is called Uneven Holes. And as I was like getting help formatting it as well with Kit and thinking through form, thinking about how the way that the poem moves through like different moments like within my childhood, but also like in my career now, and then thinking about like the gaps that appear like within just in time and the way that that form can depict like distances between different ideas in time. And then also, I've also recently been thinking, so in the second poem, it's all kind of one big chunk, but the use of Spanish within the poem, I think also, I've been thinking of it as a form of silence as well, just in the sense if we're thinking about an audience that doesn't speak Spanish, then there's something that's happening in secret that you're not privy to. And then in the end of the poem, there's this idea of like what happens in the underskin being in secret. Yeah, that's it.
I was wondering who was going to speak into the microphone as it came back. Thank you very much. And it sort of it raises another question, like when you come across a poem that has multiple different languages, it sort of contains little secrets. Like last night at the open mic night, somebody was reading a poem about their relationship with Irish, and I got the gag a little bit before everybody else because I understood, it's like the one Irish phrase I understood. I don't speak any Irish. So I managed to laugh like about 30 seconds before everybody else. And it had a real effect on me. Like I really felt like I was part of a special club. When you guys are employing different languages within your text, how conscious are you of the sort of effect it's going to have on different authors or different readers?
Sorry, I didn't mean to jump the gun there. But yeah, so in the last poem I read, I think it was like a very intentional choice to keep the title in Chinese, even though I did translate it, because I think throughout I also made references to sort of like what was mentioned before about how in Chinese there are different words, but like that kind of sound the same, but you need to know like there's like 4 tones. I'm not gonna go into a lesson, but like there's like different tones and like they all take on different meanings. So when I mentioned like treasure and bun, it's like bao and bao, which kind of sound the same. And like I made reference to like being a baby, which is also like bao. So yeah, and then 没有 and 不是, they're like 2 very similar, like they kind of have similar meanings, but when you use them wrongly in a sentence, I feel like it really exposes like because to me like Chinese is my mother tongue, but like all my education was in English. So I kind of have these like little missteps, and like they kind of just like remind me of like I can't comfortably exist in one language or the other. And I think having those moments in the poem, it makes it more authentic and real. And like I kind of want to keep that original essence rather than, and I think there's also like some discourse about like having the reader move closer to the work rather than the author pushing it towards them, because I mean the internet exists. I feel like you could Google certain words and just yeah, I think that the engagement has to happen on both sides. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Reaching?
Yeah, thank you. So so what you talked about with like languages being kind of they can be kind of either inclusive or exclusive, right? Exclusive as if like, you know, you're part of that secret club who like understands the language, and everyone else who doesn't understand it may either get it later or they may not get it at all because it's in a different language, right? And this kind of made me think of like something that me and Ethan were talking about yesterday, actually. So Ethan said something that was like, the poem should be not a puzzle, but a mystery, which I thought was really profound. And I think that really applies to kind of like multilingual poetry, in that it is something to be deciphered, but you can't really let the reader like decipher it fully, or like work to try and decipher it. Like it should remain. I mean, like Ethan, I'm sure you can explain this better, right? Because like I can't like, but like what you said yesterday had a really big effect on me. So I just thought.
I love how Frank picked up the mic and was like, no, this is, oh, I'm out of camera. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. But it's like, I was gonna answer this question, but actually it's a handoff to Ethan. It's like a little layup. So, which I can't take credit for this because it was Jack Underwood who told me this. So you know, we're just playing past the pony, but yeah. On mystery and on language and on this question, I think that something that one of my mentors, who was a linguistic anthropologist named Jonathan Rosa, something he told me that had a really profound effect on me is he was like, I don't quite believe in a lack of understanding when it comes to language, because communication is so much more than kind of the like phonetic transcription. And so when it comes to this idea of like access and the reader, I think that there is an element of faith that comes with putting your work out into the world that is not dependent on decipherability. And I think that there's a kind of both English as it's taught in high school, but if one is pushing me and I'm a couple of drinks in, maybe a colonial aspect to the kind of like the need to understand a thing, the need for a thing to be fully comprehensible in a fashion that is transparent to the observer. And I think about how in many indigenous epistemologies, like sacred languages are not languages that are understood. And that's a kind of different metric of access, right? Where that's not like, oh, it sucks that you're not in access to that, but rather that the sacred is something that is not necessarily mediated through like through the need for comprehension. And I think like poems participate in this mystery, and poems that incorporate different languages are participating, I think, in this wonderful mystery that exists throughout poetry. You know, where I'm always curious about what counts as a multilingual poem, because any given language is a kind of historically contingent entity that has within it the echoes and murmurations of pasts, violences, erasures, borrowings, exchanges. Think about creoles. Think about you know, and so the mystery is in there. You know, it's in all those different layers.
Add to that, mystery and language. And one of the workshops that we did with Janan, they were saying about how any poem that is written in a colonial language, and really in any language, I think, but specifically in languages like the histories of Spanish, for example, is never written in the original language, in the sense that it, especially if spoken from like a Latin American perspective, like it comes from a cosmovision and a history that is translated into this language that is rather incompatible with it. And so that's kind of one aspect of the question of what is multilingual poetry. And then I think about mystery, something that came up about what you were saying, and language and mystery and the need to understand. Jacob Sam-LaRose always has this analogy of like, when you start a poem, you want to get a bell ringing. And when you end the poem, you either want to like get the bell ringing more, or you want to like stop the bell. And I think that this idea of mystery to me is like hitting the bell really hard and letting it ring. And that ringing is not it doesn't transfer or like transmit a meaning that is in the way that language does, but it's just like a resonance and something that I think breaks the barrier of like the external and the internal world, even if there's no like verbal meaning behind it.
Sorry, just a small thing on that, which I just because I was so moved, where a different category that isn't about understanding, but is about resonance. Because what is resonance except something moving you, you know? And like, what does it mean to, you don't need to understand something for it to have moved you. And what would it mean to think about a poem as a kind of resonance, like that the bell that rings and kind of your body carries on that ringing with you?
Thank you very much. We're about to kind of wrap it up here. Does our audience have any questions? You look attentive, but maybe a little shy. Here we go.
I really like the answer. My question is, it's kind of just like a ploy to get book recommendations. But I wanted to know whether you guys have a poem or a collection or a poet's work in general that shaped the way you perceive poetry for the first, like in a different way. I think because I grew up hating poetry, like it was just white men and that was it. And I didn't care about anything they wrote about. And then for me, I read Post-Colonial Banter by Sahima Manzoor Khan and I was like, oh, poetry is interesting and I can care about it. So did you ever did you have a moment like that in any language of poetry? But yeah, I just want extra book recommendations.
Please.
One poet that I'm always excited to just see their name pop up on Instagram or anything is Sana Ahsan, and their collection. What's it called? I Can't Be Good Until You Say It. That last year rocked my world as sort of like being queer in South Asia and having never read anything of that kind of level and material. And they come from a very clinical psychologist background as well. And I'm so fascinated and love talking to people within STEM because of it's like such an inherently different way of thinking, but there's so much relation when it comes to like the bare bones of it. And I will get the poet's name for you, but there's a collection of the same edition of poetry within Penguin called Girls Who Never Die, and deals with a lot of sensitive topics such as FGM and assault within sort of a lot of different communities. And yeah, Sana Ahsan is just, they're coming to Stanza this year in St. Andrews. I'm going to be like trying not to scream like when I see them as well. And I think I always go back to Imtiaz Darka and Postcards to God. Just really always resonated with me as a collection growing up during high school, especially, of what kind of diaspora poem can mean, because it became a very interesting definition and it's always like a point of contention in my brain of like, am I old enough to be like, no more diaspora poem or no more diaspora poet in like, you know, speech marks, or can that just be like a label to put on an event page? Fair enough as well. But yeah, three poets and three collections, I suppose.
I got back into poetry after reading Gloria Ansaldúa and Cherry Moraga's This Bridge Called My Back. Amazing. So it's called This Bridge Called My Back, and it's a collection of poems and essays by basically like immigrants in the US and feminist organizers in the US. And there's one poem in particular called This Bridge Called My Back by Kate Rushin, in which they speak about, there's a line in which it's like, I do more translation than the goddamn UN. I'm done translating. I'm done translating the white feminists to the Black revolutionaries. I'm done translating, like, or speaking on behalf of your worst self to your better self and doing the mediation. And just kind of like this really strong, like, radical thing of like, I'm done translating. And also this idea of translation tied to intersectionality and like political organizing and compromise in political organizing. I think that really got me back into poetry and maybe solidified a link between like poetry and other work that I do, but also just like really good to see angry poetry. Do you know what I mean? There's not enough like angry poetry sometimes, and I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, on the theme of translation and language, I must recommend Dawn Mi Choi, DMZ Colony, incredible poet and translator. She's doing translations as well of this incredible Korean feminist poet named Kim Hae-soon. And then I also got to recommend Zong by M. Nervesa Philip, which really fractures language in incredible ways.
Yeah, I don't shut up about Kaveh Akbar. Like he's just like my favorite poet at the moment. I'm actually like his recent like prose novel. I have like mixed feelings about the actual prose, but it's beautiful. It's like magical realism and like this like Persian American who grew up like post 9/11. And yeah, it speaks to being Muslim, it speaks to being queer, it speaks to being a man and being gender and shit like that. Yeah, it's gorgeous. Yeah, I think his collection Pilgrim Bell is also like really, really beautiful. And it feels spiritual, it feels elevated, which is always what I look for in my poetry. Yeah.
To echo Noah's point, yes, Kaveh Akbar, love. Calling a Wolf a Wolf and Pilgrim Bell are two of like some of the best like poetry collections I've read like in my life. I also really enjoy like kind of like queer Chinese poets. So like Mary Jean Chan is another one of my like big inspirations. So like Bright Fear is like a collection that I will definitely recommend to anyone. If you like poems on like grief with a kind of like Chinese like cultural like context behind it, one of my favorite poetry collections ever is Obit by Victoria Cheng, which is I think like revolutionizes the collection as a whole is quite revolutionary in the way that it presents obituaries as poems. Because obituaries are typically very dry, very pedantic, and they don't say anything, but she manages to capture so much emotion within that block format, and I can't like recommend it enough.
Yes, absolutely. I'm Mary Jean Chan. Like I'm just their biggest fan. And then just to keep it short, Magnolia by Nina Mingya Pauls, and I think she has like another, I think it's like a short, like a travel writing type of thing, but like yeah, just the way she works with like language and translation. Also Loop of Jade by Sarah Howe, who's like a British Chinese poet, and I had a lecture with her and it was life changing. And then just for Singaporean poets, I really love like Theophilus Quack and like Joshua. If you look them up, I'm sure they have poems published. So yeah, that's all from me.
Thank you very much. Nicole, what are your recommendations?
Yes, I echo everything that they just said earlier because the names are really great writers. But I think personally for me, maybe my like so-called awakening happened when I read I think I read like Alfian Sa'ad's work in Sec 3. He's like like if for the Singaporean poets, they'll probably know that his work comes out in a lot of our exam papers for like literature. So it made me realize, like poetry is not just like super strict and strict form and like old English, because that was my impression of poetry in the past, and then it made me feel like, I'm too dumb to do this. But yeah, I think reading local work, it established that relatability for me. In terms of like I think some of us mentioned like the post-colonial translation kind of view. I read this collection recently by Chandra Nair and it's called Reaching for Stones. He's like a pioneer in like the Singapore literary scene, and even though it's not like explicitly like translation, I think a lot of his works are very like culturally informed. He was like a diplomat, I think. So he was very, very like well educated. A lot of his work, you can see how the effects of like nationalism and I think all the things he saw Singapore go through in our like early stages as a nation, how it shaped the way he viewed the world. And yeah, it's a very good mix of like personal but also very like politically informed work. So yes, that's something I would recommend.
Thank you so much. I think we're going to have to, we're over time here, so we're going to tidy it up. But is there anything else from our friends in Singapore? We've got some good hand gestures. Can we quickly ask what the name of the cat is?
The name of our cat is Calibri, like the font, Calibri. Yeah, she's a really good office companion. We go to her for emotional support and hugs and pets. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you guys have a lovely evening, and we'll be in touch soon, no doubt. Thank you. And maybe the people in Manchester can clap for the people in Singapore.
Thank you so much to everyone, both in Singapore and Manchester as well. Yeah, it's really great to see all these young poets share their work and also their experiences writing poetry and basically writing creatively in the languages that they know. So it's been a really great experience with all your sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much, folks. Okay, so that's us for this morning. And this afternoon, the Undertow Poets will be running a series of workshops here in the Manchester Poetry Library. So we'd love to see you back if you'd like to do a workshop about telling novellas or being read to as a child. Those things are available to you today. Other than that, thank you all so much. Did I ever introduce myself? No.